Well, actually, there's two questions. First is, what did you learn interviewing epidemiologists for 2 years? And the second one
Yeah.
is, are there unique things you're seeing out of this project, out of Nextstrain for COVID-19 that you didn't see before?
That's a great question. I may need to leave the second one to the biologist, but
Got it. Yeah.
but Trevor, I would say the quick answer to the second one is to follow Trevor Bedford on Twitter because
Hmm.
he's constantly tweeting, and it provides an ability for him to screenshot, right? Because his lab is maintaining this tool for others. He then can screenshot it and share what he's seeing,
Hmm.
and that's a good place to go to see Nextstrain in action on coronavirus. Um, the the first question for me, and I have to go back and just reinforce, it was really intimidating to come into science after and also to come into it because the labs, it's kind of self-selecting. The labs that are interested
Hmm.
in this and are in a position, probably younger, probably ready to try something new, like this, go out on a limb to invest lab time and lab money and resources into maintaining a platform, which is for other labs. And the incentive structure in science doesn't always reinforce that pattern. And so, it's a props to Trevor for kind of taking that step and pushing that forward. The I learned a lot about science that was unexpected, like the incentives for publishing and the way in which data
Ah.
moves around, and
Mhm.
like especially around computational biology, the way in which the wet lab biologists who are sequencing, and then the people who are doing comp bio, some of those labs are integrating where they have both wet lab and comp bio, sequencing to analysis to publication all in one. And they're, are you developing methods in the lab to like figure out a new way to make it faster or more accurate to sequence, or are you or are you on the comp bio side and you're downstream of all that and you just care about bits, and you're moving bits around in a computer. I think that's it's been really interesting to see the landscape
Mm.
of modern biology up close in that way,
Mhm.
and to see the ways in which data sharing and open data in science are changing what's possible and what we think of as
Mm.
scientific discovery and transmission, and that as well is kind of Nextray is kind of in the nexus of that, right? It incentivizes data sharing so that you can have one big tree all at once that everyone can all of the scientists, all the public health officials can evaluate on the pace of an epidemic. But then, of course, it also it also has some implications for publishing, right? And what does it mean if the insights that you want are collective insights,
Mhm.
right? Then does that change the way that scientists think about publishing? And I think that's something that's been really interesting with explorers and kind of aggregated the open data to think about, because I have kind of an outsider's perspective on
Yeah.
that, right? I'm not bound by publishing papers, and so it's like, oh well, why doesn't X, Y, or Z thing happen? And it's like, oh, I mean, because the entire incentive structure of science is against that, so kind of seeing the incentive structures for how publication that, or and how to, or GISAID for kind of, more private brokered data sharing models.
Mm.
That was all really new to me, and so I did kind of, kind of walk back, and open a few doors, or just my own curiosity in science that were kind of unrelated to, they weren't necessarily strictly necessary to be building it, but I definitely became curious about those structures, and then of course
Huh.
some of the what's become capable, what the capabilities have changed with the MinION and mobile sequencing is just
Ah.
wild. I mean, that is just that's just so fascinating to learn about, how sequencing's changed. And then I think maybe lastly, like the idea about the molecular clock, and
Yes.
the idea that mutation and evolution are happening all the time, kind of as a function of bio is messy and it's imprecise and it's copying errors, and and that those accrue and you can use them as tracking all the kind of fundamental epidemiology, R0, the transmission, infection rates, and how we think about how all those variables relate together, I think I began to like think about that a lot more too, of course, as I started to think about Ebola and, and to see some of the data sets in the tool. As I saw some of the data sets in the tool, even in my own like QA testing, like, okay, I built something and I would use Ebola and I would like load it up locally. And like, I would begin to kind of develop and tell my own stories about it. And that was kind of fun because I would, I would start Googling like, okay, well, all right, Ebola started in Gekadogu, like, what is that place? Who's there? And then of course to kind of punch through that to the more human side and say, whoa, like these are sick people.
Yeah.
And these are people who, who went into the field to do this sequencing and who work in public health and dedicate their lives to helping others. And I think that's also at the end to kind of transition out of some of the technical bits and transition out of some of the analytic bits and to say each one of those dots is a sequence, but it's also a sequence that came from a person who was ill, and then to kind of to keep that perspective and to continue to humanize the data, which is that's a nice segue because that's something I appreciate so much more about your work and some of the way you inspire me is that you work on you're constantly trying to humanize data, and I really appreciate that.
Thank you so much. Oh my gosh, what a great way to. Well, I guess there's no better way for me to end this. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks everyone for watching and listening.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Colin. And then I will be uploading this onto my YouTube. And then hopefully if there's any volunteers that's like willing to cut this down to what might be the most helpful for onboarding like developers, that'd be really great. But otherwise, thank you so much to everyone that tuned in, and thank you so much again for answering all of these questions. My mind is very blown, both by Nextstrain, and my favorite thing of today is also the oh man, I'm so bad at words. The clock, the
molecular clock.
Thank you, the molecular clock. That is also my favorite concept of the day. But I so appreciate what you say about having open data, and also about making sure to keep the people in mind as we're working with the data set. So thank you so much. Okay, bye-bye.